happening now. We want to welcome our viewers from across the United States and around the world. This is the EdTech Situation Room. Good morning, good day, good evening. This is EdTech Situation Room, episode number 346. It's February 5th, 2025. My name is Jason Neiffer. I am the Executive Director of Montana Digital Academy, which is the fabulous state virtual school located on the beautiful University of Montana campus, located right here in Missoula, Montana. I'm actually in Missoula tonight. I have been home for the last couple of days, recovering from a work trip last week, and I'll head back to help out my parents in lovely Great Falls, Montana, probably early next week. But tonight is not a podcast about my travel schedule. It is indeed the EdTech Situation Room, and joining me tonight, as always, good evening, Dr. Wesley Fryer from Charlotte, North Carolina.
Hello, Jason. It is a joy, as always, to be here and process the news. It is quite a chaotic time, but I am. I've actually I tested positive for the flu yesterday, but I have been fever-free today and stayed home from school a couple days. So I'm going to be back tomorrow, and I'm feeling much better. And I am continuing to teach media literacy, including web design and coding and computer apps to middle school students. I guess it'll be next week. I'll have to. I have a slight exciting announcement related to professional duties in the computer science department, but I'll hold off on that until next week. But I am loving my teaching and so inspired by what my kids are creating just about every day, with especially Scratch. So, what are we going to do tonight, Dr. Neiffer, in the incredibly wild and chaotic world of information in which we live?
Yeah, man, it's getting hard to keep up, and I'm just talking about the tech news, let alone the larger news around the world, which is certainly coming at us at an extraordinary pace. But we have combed the internet, as we are prone to do, to look at technology stories that we think may have an impact on education and teaching and learning. You can see all of our links, and we never get to them all because there's just so much going on at our website, edtechsr.com/links. But tonight we're going to we'll probably talk about some AI, not like anything's going on there. We will take a look at a couple of tech angles on the Washington Post. Yeah, that is angles. Some Microsoft news, some Apple news, some security news. We may talk about some drones tonight, and drones are super cool, and miscellaneous news, and then we'll end tonight on our Geeks of the Week. Dr. Fryer, you have done the lion's share of links this week. Why don't you start us off?
Well, I'm going to start with a positive one because there's a lot of negative stuff out there. I'm going to share this actually with some of my students tomorrow. And I am betting, Dr. Neiffer, that there in Montana, you did not hear about the hiker at Crowder's Mountain, which is a state park here in North Carolina. And earlier this week, a drone was used to find a missing hiker. And so the hiker was lost. They called 911. They didn't know their exact location. It was dark. The drone had thermal capabilities, was able to identify the hiker that was on top of a rise in the mountain, and found them. And that was lovely. So there's a good story related to drones, which was covered in our local press. Counterbalancing that, Ars Technica reported yesterday on February 4th that drones are now launching drones to attack other drones in the Ukraine. And we've talked a little bit about this in the past. Our school actually gave a $40,000 grant to one of our teachers to purchase a variety of different drones. We now have competition drone club. I have not yet used the coding drones, but that is one of my goals, to learn how to use those and get some of my students in my coding class to use them. But there's just a whole series of different drone uses here. Motherships that are larger drones releasing smaller ones. They're mounting shotguns, including 2 shotguns at once to the same drone. They have grenade launchers being launched to drones. They have assault rifles that they're successfully wiring onto drones. They have a magnet claw. If you remember that, sort of arcade style, that was in Toy Story or whatever too, right? Where the claw, but they're actually using claws on other drones to capture different drones. It's just wild. And so, unfortunately, armed conflict warfare tends to create a lot of competitive pressure, and lots of people respond to that. And, how does this relate to technology? Well, I'm not saying that we're going to want to be starting, you know, drone warfare clubs in any of our schools, but the use of drones for a variety of both peaceful as well as security related and even military related features is a huge part of life today. And I think that it also points to the need to be makers and to be able to code and be able to be savvy with our different devices. So anyway, those were two drone related videos that caught my eye, but I definitely want to start out with the positive one. So I think we did a good one about an Apple Watch weeks ago too, right? Where there were some hikers that were able to put their fist into the air and contact the satellite and then get pulled out of the middle of nowhere. I think in Montana, maybe in Idaho, somewhere up there in the big sky country where you are.
Yeah, and I'll make one other comment about drones too. It's a really interesting school curriculum play in that, I mean, there is a cost to entry, and you mentioned $40,000 to buy a variety of drones. You're not going to buy a classroom set of super high quality drones, but there are a lot of curricular assets available for free or inexpensively online. And if that's something that you think could strike the interest of your students, get them interested in these technologies, the drone career is very much evolving and increasing in need. So if you're looking for a clever way to maybe expand your technology related career and technical education departments, I think drones will be a fabulous place to do that.
Is career tech taking on drones in Montana? Do you know? Is that something you are connected with or have heard about?
That's a good question. I'm saying it is in part because we're working on some resources for schools right now, so they could adopt drone technologies. But I would assume it's in the business area of CTE. But also, there are CTE programs around things like aviation as well. And so, I think that's relatively rare. In fact, I think maybe 2 districts in the state have any sort of an introduction to aviation program. But I do know, especially in large cities around the United States that have very focused career and technical education, separate centers for students, that aviation is a very common pathway. And also, I think it would be also a fabulous elective for middle school students too. Yeah. And again, you're not going to go out and buy a classroom set of these. And if you have even super nice drones, there is a barrier to entry here, right? I mean, there are a lot of much cheaper, much a little more. Play is not the right word, but experimental platforms that you can utilize. But I think it's pretty interesting stuff, and it's a place that my organization is looking to get into, in part in support of schools, so that we could work on sharing some of the equipment between schools, and then looking for high quality digital curriculum to help support those efforts.
Yeah, well, real quick, my dad and I went to the Sullenberger Museum, which is named for Sully Sullenberger, who was famous Air Force Academy graduate and longtime pilot that landed the airplane Miracle on the Hudson. And they actually have that aircraft now in the museum here in Charlotte. But they have a very, very excellent area of that museum just dedicated to aerospace. The needing aircraft mechanics. Charlotte International Airport is an incredibly busy airport. And that is something that I know some members of our department have been looking into. And it absolutely, I will pick up sometimes on kids who are interested in aerospace. And I think having a way to plug kids into learning about aerospace careers and possibly flying themselves. And there's so many ways that you can be involved in the aerospace industry, beyond just being a pilot. So good stuff there. And lots of important, STEM skills, but also very marketable vocational skills.
Yep, absolutely.
All right, take us a different direction.
Okay, let's well, actually, I'm going to pick up one of your articles because it's super interesting. Shine, Temu, I would assume AliExpress is also in this condition. They're depending on a 100-year-old loophole in the law in order to keep things cheap, and Trump is looking to close that loophole. And as I'm sure you have, as I'm sure you have noticed in the international media, there seems to be talks of tariffs right now. I do think that I don't think we have any articles on this tonight, but I would say that if you are a district IT director or in somewhere in budgeting, keep a close eye on your budgets and also what your vendors are telling you in regards to both availability and expense for tech. I will tell you that in anticipation of this action, there's a couple of tech products that we purchased about a month earlier than we intended to, because we were concerned about, because we had budgeted them, but we're concerned that the tariffs could potentially increase the cost of those, since high-tech items tend to be a fodder for this. But sorry to steal your article here, Wes, but for those of you that are super into Temu, and I'll admit I bought some stuff on Temu and AliExpress for that matter, and in fact I think if I remember correctly, it is like this is a bag of stuff I bought from Temu. So I'll show you the kind of stuff that I'm talking about. We're not talking about super interesting things. This is a roll of double-sided tape that I use to help organize cables and stuff on my desk at home. And I did like the design of this cable, which does this. Maybe that's the part that was most interesting to me, but it's also a 4-in-1, so it's got the old Apple standard on here, and you can pull it off, and that goes to USB-C, and then it's got the old USB, and it's got that. I will test this cable to make sure it's not a bad cable, which is a risk of buying anything that's not one of the 4 or 5 major brands in the United States. So that's kind of cool. I do often buy, let's see what else is in here that's not just plainly embarrassing.
It's the mystery grab bag. It's the hot mess of the situation room.
This $1 plastic gear is something I'm going to actually attach to the side of my cabinet to put my headphones. So it's a little headphone holder. So, dorky things like that. And you could buy this stuff usually pretty cheap on Amazon too. But the reason why Temu and Shine and also to some extent AliExpress can sell this stuff to you so cheaply is because they go directly to the manufacturer. And in fact, there's been a couple of really interesting articles about how Temu works. It's not just this the fact that they can just ship it directly to you and not face import tariffs or any sort of additional fee to bring that in. It's also because it's highly volatile shopping. And so a lot of times the things they offer for sale on Temu are not even real products yet, or they know they can make it, but they don't know how much to make. So they will closely monitor things and manufacture it within a week or so of the order in a large amount, because they got a certain number of orders to be able to do that. And so it's really hyper focused supply chain pieces. That's neither here nor there. But the reason why these systems and tools may go away is because Trump wants to get rid of what's called the de minimis rule, which means the packages under $800 in value can enter the United States without any levy of a duty. Right, and recipients in the U.S. can get up to $800 worth of stuff per day without paying a dime of import taxes. And there are major manufacturers here, or major e-commerce platforms, Temu, Shine, AliExpress, all famous for this. But there are also a large number of smaller operations, including, for example, lots of people that sell on Amazon are actually selling you something that either is sitting in a factory somewhere in China and they directly ship it to you, or you may take 3 or 4 weeks to get it, but ends up coming to the United States and shipped from an import-export group here. And there's a lot of like I've seen a lot of videos complaining about Temu and its ilk, talking about, well, that takes away American jobs because a lot of people import this stuff and sell it on Amazon. I understand that in some way, shape, or form, but if I'm buying something that I just need bare minimum quality, I'm not entirely sure why it's any different that they're buying it from a Chinese importer and taking a profit off of it versus me just cutting the profit off the top of that. That's neither here nor there. But the tariffs and the trade policy changes will have impacts on American consumers. That's not debated. In fact, President Trump admitted that the other day, that if all of the tariffs that he's proposing go through on Mexico and Canada, the 10% increase in Chinese tariffs is going through. There doesn't seem to be any negotiation around that. But he said there will be some pain, and pain means increased prices, and so it'll be interesting to watch how that plays out in the coming weeks and months.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, our neighbor is kind of addicted to Temu, so when I saw that, I thought, oh, I'm going to have to share that with them. And I know, for 4 years as a tech director, it was really wonderful to be able to get so many different, kinds of supplies so quickly, so cheaply. Supply chains, we learned during COVID, can be relatively fragile. So there's going to be a lot of impacts, and I think there's probably going to be, unanticipated impacts. A related article to that I put under the tech angles on Washington politics relates to China as well as tariffs. So if we're going to talk about that, this is from The Verge on February 4th. China opens Google antitrust probe in retaliation to tariffs. So this is obviously rapidly changing news, but the tariffs were temporarily suspended for 30 days for Mexico and Canada, but not for China. And so in retaliation, China is doing a variety of things, but one of them involves an antitrust investigation. And we can talk, if we want a little more about that, because I've got an article about Apple and what they were trying to do in the Google antitrust case, which is moving towards the penalty phase. But this is an antitrust investigation, basically focusing on, it says Chinese anti-monopoly laws, and this is specific to Android and some of the other competitors, phone manufacturers. I've never heard of this, Oppo and Xiaomi. So it's going to be wild, and I think that we're in a constitutional crisis, and we're also in a trade war. So if things weren't exciting enough for you, then, you just got, a whole new arena of current events, just, lots more to watch and keep track of. I doubt this is going to change Google, but I haven't tracked that actually lately, because right at some point Google stopped. I thought they stopped allowing Android to be in China, but then there was some bootleg version, or maybe they stopped allowing Google Docs to be available inside the Chinese versions, or was that? Remember all the talk we had about the phones? What's the phone that was banned? And
yeah, and also there are alternative operating systems now that are growing quickly inside China that I think are intended. I mean, and because not that it really matters, but since Android's an open source framework, you can take it, you can build your own stuff on top of it, right? To create an alternative operating system, and then the apps would be similar to program to make them a reality. So you wouldn't have to use a new language or a new framework for that purpose. But I do think there's an increasing fragmentation of the internet, right? And part of that too is standards. Part of that too would be operating systems. And, it does kind of strike at the heart of what was exciting about the internet in the early days, right? Which was a universal access to information to anyone that has an internet connection. And I think the fragmentation of operating systems, of devices, of ecosystems just makes this incredibly complicated in light of, perhaps naive, but very significant desires of the early founders and purveyors of kind of global internet dreams.
Yep. We've talked about that quite a bit on the show. All right. What else would you like to chat about, or you want me to grab one?
Let's talk about the Microsoft problem, because I think I know what this article is about, but do you want to take that one?
Sure. So this has come from ZDNet on February 4th. Microsoft has a big Windows 10 problem, and it's running out of time to solve it. And basically, this is the end of life issue that all operating systems face. Microsoft needs all of its Windows 10 users to transition to Windows 11. Although they're not going to force them to, your Windows 10 PC is going to continue to function after the deadline. It's just, which is what? When is the actual deadline?
October.
July, maybe?
October 14th, I think. Yep, October 14th.
October 14th, 2025. And, it's just not going to receive those security updates. There are some ways that you can be having this extended security update subscription, but basically most Windows 10 users, need to be migrating. And so the article goes into some depth about how difficult it is to know exactly how many people are running Windows 10 now. And then there's some estimates, but basically, this is part of digital literacy and media literacy today. There's an article we can talk about too about Internet of Things firmware and what we need to know as consumers about the shelf life of these things and why it's really important to update firmware and, have an eye for companies that are going to be going bust and not wanting our devices to be hacked. So part of the responsibility as computer owners is we need to keep our software updated and we need to refresh it. And this is for us as consumers, but of course it's also for us as schools as well. So do you think there are many Montana schools on Windows 10, or do you think everyone's transitioned off?
I'm fairly certain that there's a ton of schools that are on Windows 10. And part of it too is that, hats off to the magicians in schools where there isn't a lot of budget to buy technology, but I know of some tech directors in Montana at medium and small size schools that can take a castaway desktop computer from state surplus and keep it going for another 6 or 8 years with incremental upgrades. And it's not a premium experience by any stretch of the imagination, but they still are able to get students access in that way. But I find this to be befuddling to me in that I understand why Microsoft financially wants people to move to Windows 11, right? And they'll make security arguments and other pieces. And, I didn't like Windows 11 at first. I now think it's fine. I mean, it's not, I wouldn't call it, I don't think it's in any way better than Mac OS by any stretch of the imagination, but it's fine. It's a functional operating system. I can get it set up pretty well to my liking. But Windows 10 is still a really high quality operating system. And I was shocked by the stat in this article that said that 60%, according to StatCounter, 60% of machines still run Windows 10 or of all machines. So that would also include, I think, all the other operating systems. But, more than half of the world's machines, or at least half of the Windows machine, more than half of the Windows machines are running operating system that will not receive updates 6 months or 8 months from now, right? And that's really problematic. And I think it goes back to the fact that, I think Windows 10 was a good update for Microsoft. It was a much, 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 much better operating system than Windows 8 for sure. And I thought it was noticeably better than Windows 7. But I also think that, by making it a good operating system that also worked well on older hardware, there's just no reason for people to update. And I'll give you a great example of this. My mom, who is pretty tech savvy. I mean, she was one of the first people in the city of Great Falls, Montana, to do personalized bookkeeping via computer. And I think I mentioned this before, but my first computer was actually not a PC, not a Commodore 64, not a Mac. It was a K-Pro 4, which runs the CP/M operating system. If you want to go in a rabbit hole, you can find that stuff online. It had 8-inch floppy disks, and my mom had customized accounting software. that was programmed for her in BASIC and compiled on a compiler to run faster. And so she was early days, right? And my mom has a Windows 10 laptop that she purchased 8-9 years ago. It's got a 4th generation Intel i5 processor in it. It's USB-C, so it had some advanced features on it, but it works just fine. It's not slow. I've offered to wipe it and start over again for her because that's a way to keep things running smoothly. She says, nope, working just great. And runs, I think, Office 2016 on it, maybe. And it's working great for her. And when I told her that we're going to have to update her sometime in 2025, and to be clear, it's not a financial thing for my mom because I'll just give her, one of the vast Neiffer collection of laptops that, is newish, and I'll put Windows 11 on and it'll be great. It's just that the pain of upgrading, right? And even if you don't have a financial situation, which a lot of people do, eggs are $10 a dozen. The bottom line is that we are. It's just a really hard argument to make. And if something really bad happens, let's say January 2026, that some really nasty piece of malware ends up spreading quickly over Windows 10's devices that are not patched, I think Microsoft has massive egg on its face for doing that, and that lets alone schools, right? And the other complication, of course, of Windows 11 is that it is not it's only compatible with 8th generation or newer Intel chips, right? And it's not a factor of speed. Speed is not it at all because there are.
Oh, that's right. It does depend on the chip.
Yeah, because I think it's TPM is the name of the security chip, TPM2. If my memory
serves me correctly. It's been a while, but I remember that because when we were looking at updating, there were some lab computers we had, and it was like, well, these are too old. We can't put 11 on these.
That's well, right. and I'll give an example of this. Like this device here is this is a trash can Mac, which I purchased for a song on eBay. And it's a toy at this point, right? This is I remember I'm the guy that likes to collect computers like old cars and get underneath and play with them. Right now, this is running Linux. And it's kind of a media server for me right now. I won't go into further details about what ridiculousness I'm doing with it, but this thing has despite being 12 years old, it has a really fast Intel chip in it that is faster than most of the stuff you can pick up in a consumer level laptop at Walmart or at Amazon. And so it's not a speed question, right? Because that's not the point. There are slower chips for sale right now that are Windows 11 compatible, slower than this device, right? But it's a security chip. And Microsoft at first was cracking down on people because you can upgrade without the security chip. You have to, sometimes do a little clicky, hacky thing. But there are ways around that you can upgrade it, and Windows 11 works just fine. It lacks some of the advanced security features because that chip is missing. And Windows has gone back and forth on there. Microsoft's gone back and forth on this. One week they're allowing it, the next week they're not. Now there's a rumor that if you're running it on illegitimate hardware, that they're going to start limiting which apps that you can install on it, which I just think is also kind of foolhardy as well. But I get it, and I understand why Microsoft, and I have read somewhat persuasive documents to say that the security apparatus is a really important one. So we're not just talking about, a planned obsolescence to force people to upgrade, but the bottom line is that I think this is really hard on consumers, and man, it would be just truly awful if some really bad security thing happened on unpatched Windows boxes because Microsoft stopped sending updates.
Well, yeah, and I'm thinking about CrowdStrike last summer. Yeah. I'm thinking about, 0-day exploits and how many of those someone is sitting on right now and what that might look like. If there's not some way to quickly update, it seems to me with computer upgrades, and maybe I'm wrong, but that we've kind of plateaued a little bit. Like I think the functionality, the performance, look at that, of what an amazing machine.
Yeah.
The functionality and performance of computers, of smartphones, even of smartwatches. I mean, I
Yeah.
think I'm still, even though my smartwatch has got a cracked crown and need to replace it, but it's working fine and it's not terrible. I'm still, it's an Apple Watch 3.
Yeah.
It just, these things work great, and I'm so happy with our M1 home laptop that we have,
Yeah.
and I don't see us needing to change that for quite a while. So I wonder if Microsoft needs to reconsider some of its thought processes about that. As important as security is, it either seems like they need to have like a emergency contingency patch option, and maybe they do, maybe that's in existence, other than here, download and install this. But in the case of CrowdStrike, think about that. I mean, it debilitated machines to the point where they couldn't be just restarted. They had to actually, I think, have the firmware fixed or whatever. But either that, or go ahead and say, hey, this thing stops working in 10 years and you're going to have to get something else. And I wonder from a regulatory standpoint, I mean, we are no way in any kind of shape where we're going to have any kind of regulation about anything like this, anytime soon. But I wonder if we had, a sort of optimal situation, would you want to have regulations that would say, for instance, to IoT companies, you need to pledge support for X number of years, and then after that, the consumer knows, hey, my light bulb is going to stop working, or there's an option to buy. But it seems to me that the whole model of saying this is going to run, probably forever, but we're just going to stop supporting it, therefore we're going to create this enormous security vulnerability that is wide open for hackers to exploit. It seems like it's misdesigned from the start, especially as hostile as our computing environment is today.
Yeah, and I'd also note too that there are ways to keep the hardware running securely, right? We've mentioned Chrome OS Flex in the past, which works really well on 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old hardware. If you are a little more adventurous, I've had a ton of luck running Linux on older laptops to make them quite functional, and you can download a modern web browser and use Google Docs or Office Online, and it works great. I do think that in the same way, we've talked about this a little bit in the past, that there was a commitment by Samsung, this was pre-pandemic, to allow people to unlock older devices so you could use them in projects and make them power robots and do all sorts of things. I mean, I do think that the amount of e-waste being generated by this action by itself means that I think Microsoft, I mean, if I were them, I would just create a specific edition of Linux that was basically just an Edge browser that got security updates just to keep this stuff going and out of the trash pile. But it just seems like a short-sighted thing. And also, I mean, I have equal criticism. Apple stopped supporting hardware well before its useful life is over with. And I'll go back to my ridiculous trash can Mac, by the way. It's sleek looking, but man, it's kind of a chunk. I think this is just the most hilarious piece of hardware ever. But the thing,
let's all get out our different.
It's our different pets.
Yes, I know. Except mine's one-eyed. Anyway. Yeah. Distractions. My kids are like, but this is Dave, by the way.
Yeah. So you can take the trash can Mac. 2013 was the year this was released. It's 2013 level hardware, and you can install Monterey on it. So that's a 4-year-old operating system, and it's useful, but it's not getting security patches as of last year. But you can also download. We talked about the open source patcher a long time ago, and Dr. Fryer has also updated hardware in that way as well. And
using it right now, baby.
Yeah.
Using it right now.
and this, you can put this year's Mac OS 10 on here, and it runs pretty well. And so that tells you that Microsoft, is not. I'm sorry, Windows. Apple. Thank you very much. Apple is moving past this. They were not supporting anymore. It's not getting It's not getting security patches. Even on the older operating system, it supports. And this hardware can support the modern operating system. We have proof of that. And and if you bought this bad boy too, not on an eBay fire sale, but retail, they sold this from 2013 to 2019. This was $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 of hardware, super high end, right? Really good internals, which is why it runs pretty darn well in 2025, but with other operating systems. But yeah, so that was a long rant about Microsoft, but I think it's something that is very practical that I know is going to impact schools.
Well, we've got to talk about some AI stuff to include DeepSeek. But let me real quickly, let's do the security article, and then I want to do the context window about Gemini, and then we can jump into DeepSeek. So robocallers were posing as FCC staff. They got blocked after they robocalled real FCC staff. This is Ars Technica from today on February 5th. Interesting, the FCC requires the telecom companies to identify and know who their customers are. And so these folks just, used the address of a hotel somewhere in Canada, and an IP email for mariocop123.com domain that they bought, and anyway ended up robocalling a bunch of folks. But they used a company that is called Telnyx, Telnyx, that allows you to use AI to create voices and be able to basically robocall. And so there's a vote for a $4.5 million fine and trying to really crack down on these bad actors. Sadly, one of the members of the FCC, because of it basically is not going to be able to ever vote for any fine. Nathan Symington, not because of the facts of this case, but had a dissenting vote because of a recent Supreme Court case ruling that limits the power of federal agencies. Symington has vowed to vote against any fine imposed by the commission until its legal powers are clear. Gosh, talk about, government that is just not able to be effectual. But anyway, there's a couple of the security things. Let's jump into AI. I saw this headline: Google has launched its new Gemini model. The biggest thing about this is the headline is Google launches new AI models and brings thinking to Gemini. It's the size of the context window. I asked Gemini about this, and then I also asked ChatGPT. So as context, Claude 2.1 allows for a context window, which is the quantity of data that it can process simultaneously in a single conversation, as 2,000 tokens, which is really big. ChatGPT 4 Turbo is only 128,000 tokens.
You said 2,000. You meant 2 million, right?
Gemini 2 Pro is 2 million. So did I say Gemini? So yeah. Claude 2.1, 200,000. GPT-4 Turbo, even less, 128,000. Gemini 2 Pro, 2 million tokens. Yeah. So we're talking, 10 times the context window of competitor Claude, which is amazing. I know that I was doing a AI coding project recently, and I ended up needing to, use multiple conversations in Claude because I got to the conversation limit and had to start over. And so I don't think Google is at this point caught up, but it is supposed to be really good with coding, and I will be playing with it a little bit more. Have you done much with Gemini lately?
Yeah, I use Gemini quite a bit, actually, for a couple of reasons. The first one is that, and I have a pro account right now that I think expires in 2 or 3 months that I got randomly as a Chromebook Pro user. And one of my ways of getting access was I had found a dirt cheap, really nice Chromebook, actually, that on eBay for like $80 that no one else is bidding on because people don't bid on high-end Chromebooks. and it got a year of Gemini with it, so it was great. So I have been paying for Gemini for over a year now, and it wasn't my go-to model per se, but Gemini 2 is a monumental step forward. It is noticeably way better than Gemini 1.5. But secondarily, there's now a deep research mode, which I don't know if we've talked about this yet. If it was just this that was released, it would be like, if this had been released 5 years ago, everyone would be talking about it. But it's just yet another, jaw-dropping AI tool that now exists. But they have something called deep research mode, where you can ask it to research for you. And I think this is just in Pro, just in Gemini Pro. But it will research for you. So as an example of this, please write a comprehensive dossier on Dr. Wes Fryer. And I thought I did it right, but I didn't spell dossier right. It's got 2 S's. Okay.
Do you have to do something to invoke deep research?
You have to choose the model. It's a model available in Gemini, and this is my personal Gemini account. I do not have enough information to help with your request. Okay. Well, hold on. Please, maybe I need to ask it to please research. Please research. Oh, wow. Okay. So it's not going to allow me to do that. But if I say something like, please research 2024 trends in social media management for schools and universities. Now it's pausing for a moment. Okay, here's the plan I've put together. Let me know if you need any changes before I start researching. It's going to research websites, including articles and reports on social media trends, for schools, case studies of schools. There's 6, suggested searches is going to work on. It's going to analyze results and create a report ready in a few minutes. So I start research, and now this is going to research this for me. And it starts off by doing a Google search, in which it's going to return a number of websites, and then visit all these on my behalf, and then write a 3 to 4 page report for me, right? Now, this is a lot what Perplexity does, right? So to be clear, again, not jaw-dropping new, but it happens in the background. You have less finite control, because with Perplexity, you can oftentimes eliminate a source you don't like. Right, but it's using Google algorithms to determine what the highest quality sources are, and then it's going to read these. In this case, it's came up with 35 websites, Digistorm.com, social media tools, Sprout Social, which I think is a service, socialnetworkdesk.com. There's a couple of NIH articles, ethical considerations for schools using social media, policies from Northwestern University, 35 sources total. So now it's reviewing those resources on my behalf. And then in a couple of minutes, and by the way, I can walk away. Like, I don't have to sit here and watch this. I can just have it do it and walk away and come back and grab it later. And then it will write this into a report, which I can export to Google Docs. And all the sources are cited, and then there's a, admittedly not formal works cited page, but a list of links at the end where it got all the information.
It occurs to me it is just so dependent upon context. So I did the exact same thing. Please research an in-depth dossier of Dr. Jason Neiffer. Gemini Advanced 1.5 Pro with deep research, don't have enough information, can't do. Go to Gemini 2.0 Pro Experimental.
Yeah.
It goes ahead and gives a full-blown explanation, but it's saying that you are associate professor, Department of Criminal Justice at Indiana University, Purdue University, and then you went to University of Cincinnati, Northern Kentucky, all this stuff. Like, I think it's just hallucinated all this stuff. You research community corrections, risk need assessment. And I better be careful too, because look, this is crazy. But if I will say things in a YouTube video, it will train models.
Yep.
Isn't that crazy? Okay, AI tools. If you're listening to what I just said, I was reading a hallucination from Gemini 2.0 Pro experimental. Crazy. Okay, then I go to Claude, and in the latest version of Claude, it gives a little bit, couple paragraphs, but nothing cited, I guess because I don't think Claude has that live search feature. But then ChatGPT 4.0 gives an amazing, accurate, multi-paragraph summary with citations to include the virtuallearningalliance.org, from X, from virtuallearningalliance.org, from aicentrist.com, from YouTube. And then it also includes a little graphic of you. I don't know if that's coming from the Virtual Learning Alliance. Wow.
Well, okay. So yeah, I just did a Gemini search on myself too. Here's the funniest part about this. Here's a dossier of Jason Neiffer based on publicly available information. He's a figure with a strong online presence, so there's a good amount of information to compile. The date it was compiled, it says, was October 23rd, 2023. So obviously that's not true, because it make it sound like, and of course none of this is correct. So I'm an American archaeologist and classical scholar specializing in Greek and Roman archaeology.
So it hallucinated something different for you.
Yeah. And I mean, the cool thing is I did get my PhD at the University of Michigan in classical art and archaeology, which, to be clear, would be a super cool get, right? I'd love a PhD in those things from the University of Michigan. But I've also worked as the director of Corinth excavations at the American School of Classical Studies in Athens. That's a pretty cool thing. I also have been involved in several excavations and also digital initiatives. I'm a proponent of using technology to make archaeological data more accessible, including projects related to 3D models of sites, GIS applications for organizing excavation data. So I've also written in the Journal of American School of Classical Studies in Athens. So I'm super hardcore, but yeah, it's interesting that this model, and by the way, so much better than 1.5 in my experience, is still hallucinating, and it's Google.
This is really eye-opening. And I guess different people are going to take an experiment like this in different ways. Some people are going to say, well, see, AI is crap and you just shouldn't use it at all. I'm going to continue to say, as we've said multiple times in this show, we need to use these tools to investigate topics we're really familiar about, that we can vet because of our expertise. It does really, I think, point to the fact that these are not ready for prime time in terms of being replacements for search engines. But wow, I think I'm going to hopefully get to go to a local conference that one of our independent schools is having this weekend on Saturday morning about AI. I think it's going to mainly be history and English teachers, but I am eager to, learn some new things. And I just, I want to continue to use it to brainstorm with my students, to write code. Again, writing code is different than, research this topic, help me learn about such and such. But wow, this is a very, very dramatic difference. And the fact that you got a different hallucination than I did was that was using Gemini 2.0 Pro experimental.
Gemini 2.0 Pro, yeah.
Pro,
they're calling it Pro experimental, but yeah.
Yeah. So I just, wow, that is stunning. I'm frankly disappointed. I mean, I think we both maybe anticipated that Google was going to move ahead. And of course they still could, but wow. Well, ChatGPT 4, I guess it's 4.0, 4 little o. How do you even say that out loud?
Yeah, it's 4.0.
Is really impressive. And it's also good to do these kinds of searches periodically. I know is World War I the one you typically do?
Yeah. I have.
I mean, something that you have a lot of content knowledge about, and then you're able to also see how the model advances.
And I try new models all the time. And in fact, I have a text expansion snippet to where if I type .aitest, it'll put out this relatively lengthy prompt about writing a student-facing text about World War I. But I think that's not everyone's going to want to do this or even has the wherewithal to do it. But I think for those of you that are tech savvy teachers or IT people, I mean, that's the kind of stuff that you want to be testing out, right? Poking at these models a little bit. And it's not necessary that you're going to always find, ultimate insights based on this, but it is the kind of questions we should be asking, right? Like, how does it respond to everyday requests that mirror the kinds of things I would do with AI?
You may have run across this kind of a framework, but it seems to me like a useful thing we could really be using in the classroom today is like the sorts of questions and tasks that we should bring to AI at this point. I continue to find, for instance, when I write a letter and then ask it to improve on my writing or edit that. I do this with social media posts and blog posts. Sometimes I do include attribution with coding. With brainstorming a topic, with matching the format of something I've done before, and then taking a long transcript and summarizing it and matching it. Like, I don't know who's created that. I'm sure people have, but it's we're wanting to sort of give everything to the AI. Hey, it's just going to become my new Google. It's going to be my new search engine. No. Definitely a major no.
Yeah. Well, and there was a conversation about this a couple of weeks ago on Hard Fork about the environmental implications of AI, and that was it. Actually, I thought it was a very well balanced conversation, even though it was an industry leader that was speaking to the issue. But if you're just asking what the capital of Mississippi is, or you are interested in knowing what time a movie is at, like, at some point I think agents are going to be more a part of that, especially as they're built into Android and iOS phones. But the bottom line is that right now you're going to have a better time with a Google search, and Google, on the top of all their pages now, has an AI summary. But also for 10 years now, they had knowledge graphs of finally picked information for the algorithm that probably answers your question. I will say, kind of to that point, we've talked about this one before, but Chatbot Arena, which is at lmarena.ai, is a great place if you really want to know what it's like to get chat responses back from different models. That's a model where you can put in a prompt and it will generate two different options, and you vote which one's better. And then they use that to create a leaderboard. And so in a lot of ways, it's a very kind of democratic way. I know when I hear all these benchmarks, which by the way, I don't really understand the benchmarks they use to measure AI. I don't have the technical background or wherewithal to understand those. I have to take those opinions a lot of times at face value because I don't understand it. But I do understand how Chatbot Arena works, because it blindly tells you, or it blindly gives you two options. You vote on one, and you can also vote both are bad. You can also vote they're both good. But using that, they create a leaderboard of current models. And so this may be a good a segue into what will be our last topic for the night, I think. If not, maybe we'll punt it to next week. But the leaderboard right now, the top 5 are Gemini Flash Thinking is number 1, Gemini 2.0 Pro is number 2, ChatGPT 4o is 3, DeepSeek R1 is 4, Gemini 2.0 Flash O1 is 5, 2 more OpenAI models, and let's see here if Claude is even in the Claude is way down there. Claude Sonnet is number 15 right now. And there's less than 100 points separating the top 20, so it's not a huge deal. But these are all models that you can blindly try out and start to get a sense of this. And this is a tool I would love to use with students, because if you want to really demonstrate, in the same way that I used to talk about the Wikipedia, by editing myself into it every time I introduced it with a class, and it's like, it's not an invaluable tool. You just need to know how it works, right? So that you can appropriately adjust your expectations. But I think this is a great example of a site that, if you can talk your district and unblock it, I'm 100% sure it's got to be on a bunch of blocking lists right now for providers of filters to schools. But it's an incredibly good media literacy tool, because you can start to teach students that you're going to get different models are going to produce different results.
A couple articles I'd like to hit before the Geeks of the Week. Here's one that is really a big deal and was buried. It wasn't, on the front of Google News or anything like that. This is The Guardian from today on May 5th, and I think I'd heard this a couple days ago. Google owner drops promise not to use AI for weapons. Alphabet's guidelines no longer refer to not pursuing technologies that could, quote, cause or are likely to cause overall harm. And so the idea of Google using its AI tools to possibly, be used for AI weapon systems is, back on the table, if it ever was, completely off the table as far as what they had said in some of their public statements. I wanted to mention this one too. We're not going to dive into the deepness, but I actually was, found an article via Google News recommendation that led me to this. This is an author whose name is Nathan Tankis, and he writes a blog called Notes on the Crises. This is the best deep dive that I've read into the Bureau of Fiscal Service and the Treasury Department and what is involved in terms of the access that Elon Musk and his people have been able to gain access to. And so this is a news source that I just not heard of him before. And he's been cited by some other notable people. And I just found that to be useful in terms of just trying to sort out what the heck is going on with all of that. And there's such, the fact that Elon started in PayPal and knows a lot about payment processing doesn't necessarily mean that he can jump into the COBOL systems, which are incredibly complex and need a 100% success rate at their processing and paying every month. And so, just as a cautionary statement, I think I would tell everybody that I think we need to all be really prepared for volatility in our financial markets and in possibly even some government services and the provision of things that we've come to rely on. I just think that it's a very, very volatile time. There are a lot of pretty big changes afoot, and technology is certainly playing a role in all of those. And I don't know if I'm probably not going to talk to my students about this at all, but there was a COBOL programmer who was actually blind in our men's group that I knew when we lived in Oklahoma. And it was really fascinating because I wish I had done an interview with him. I think he's still living. Maybe I could at some point. But I mean, he was a mainframe COBOL programmer. And so he'd done all kinds of work with banks and all kinds of mainframes. And, part of the difficulty in not having these systems, in modern programming languages and modern platforms, these things are reliable, but they're highly complex. And I think that many of us underestimate the level of complexity of these systems. And even when, as this article talks about, when consultants would come in and promise what they could do, well, it's a lot of complexity and a lot of code to wade through. But having folks in the middle of that, possibly writing changes into it, could produce some dramatic, volatility. And so I hope I'm wrong, but I think that it is important for us all to be as prepared as we can for volatile times.
Absolutely. And I also know too that wherever you are on the political spectrum here, whether you agree or disagree, the discussions that are happening at a national, international level right now represent a dramatic shift from the direction things were going into. And so whether you like the direction it's going into or not, the bottom line is it's going to have an impact on schools. So and so we have to keep keep informed, right, and keep an eye on how things are playing out. So I'd love to talk about DeepSeek, but that would take another hour. So I think we
Oh,
should.
yeah.
Yeah, I
Shoot.
think we should
We
cut
only
that
left you
short.
30 seconds. That's
I
not
know.
enough time.
And I would say, and I'll repeat this next week too, but one thing to note, if you're listening to this and you haven't already come to this conclusion, because we know the sophistication of our amazing audience, but you need to separate DeepSeek the app from DeepSeek the model. And I have a great CNBC article where they explain this in some detail, but a lot of the panic going on right now about DeepSeek broadly is conflating the app and the model. The app is not unlike TikTok or Facebook or any social media app. It collects information from you. It looks at your IP address. It looks at which device you're using. Anything it can do to fingerprint you, it does for whatever reason, right? But Facebook does that, and Instagram does that, and TikTok does that, and Lemon 8, the alternative to TikTok, that's a Chinese app that a lot of people left to during the Timu, or not Timu, the the TikTok drama. Like all those pieces are, they all work the same way. And if you go and put in information to DeepSeek, you can sign up for free. It's got chat GPT level models where you can go sign up for free and chat with it in not an unlimited way, but as much as you want to, or grab an API and put it into your own app. There's lots of pieces there. That also would collect data on you and maybe training on the model, but it's an open source model that has been downloaded by several American companies, not the least of which Microsoft has an offering, Google has an offering, Open Router, which I've recommended sometimes in the past. You can access DeepSeek there, and you can even put it on your own computer and run some version of DeepSeek on your own computer. That's not able to contact a mothership somewhere and share your information and your data. It may be used in some other way if you're using a third-party model, but it's just not going to be used in the way the app is. So there's a lot more to talk about here, and I've got a couple great things that we'll share next week about this, but I needed to say that.
All right. Sounds good. Well, maybe we can start there next week. So.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Fryer, what would you like to share this week for your Geek of the Week?
All right. Well, I'll just cut it down to two. We had a great conversation on Monday for the Media Ed Club of the Media Education Lab on AI chatbot ethics. The archive of our conversation is available there. There are a host of, 14 different required and optional, we call them media links that relate to that topic. And chatbot ethics is pretty important. And then next is just a quick blog post. I was literally, and I told my kids about this, exclaiming, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe it!" Right here at my computer, because I was using Claude to create some just HTML files of my Mastodon list that I wanted to share with our daughter who is getting on Mastodon. And there is no way, I think there's 455 lines of HTML code. There's no way I would have been writing that in, it took me several hours to do, but just absolutely unbelievable capability. And I'm thankful to be, teaching coding right now and sort of having some more reasons to dabble in this. But I don't know how many people out there are playing with AI for creating, sort of simple coding solutions. And so that's my third GitHub project, baby. Not that I'm expecting anybody to want to go there and do a lot with it, but Mastodon lists are not public, and there are some other projects and things that people are working on, and through the Fediverse and Mastodon, I've got some links to those, but I wrote a blog post about it. So what about you, sir?
I just to share a quick project that I think might be interesting to you, but I've been working with my parents to install some security stuff and some other IoT devices. And like my house, and I know Dr. Fryer's house as well, sometimes you buy stuff and it doesn't work always in the same ecosystem. Well, I have a strategy around that that's proven to be really, really interesting. There's an open source system called Home Assistant OS, HAOS, where you can take a box. It works on a Raspberry Pi. You can buy hardware from a third party to do it, or I just took an old i5 6th generation mini PC that I had that's relatively low power, and I stuck that on there. And through all of its integrations, you can sign into all of the the Amazon universe and the Google universe and the Apple universe and the third party universe, which I think I just made up a term, but and you can control them all together. So, for example, if this door opens up and from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m., it's on its own third-party app, but it's integrated into HAOS, and so it sends a notification to my phone, and also sets off an audio notification on the Alexa sitting in my mom's room. So that's the kind of stuff you can do with it. And if you just like a good nerdy rabbit hole to go down, it is a nerdy rabbit hole. But this show isn't a nerdy rabbit hole. Dr. Fryer, where can people find you on the internet?
I am linked up at wesfryer.com, and I am continuing to share things on multiple platforms, but preferring Blue Sky and Facebook primarily. How about you?
Yep, I'm available at aicentrist.com, and this here is the EdTech Situation. We're a once-a-week podcast on most Wednesday nights. Sometimes our life schedules get the better of us, but you can find us here most Wednesday nights at 7 p.m. Mountain Time, 9 p.m. Eastern Time, sometime in the middle of the night UTC. If you can't join us live, although I wish you would, feel free to find our videos on YouTube. You can also download the podcast wherever finer podcasts are aggregated, and see all of our past episodes, and go back to the first ones, because they are a lot worse than the ones we're doing now. So we got a pretty tight strategy here. So stay safe, stay savvy. We hope you have a wonderful week, and we'll see you next time on the EdTech Situation Room. Good night.
Good night, everybody.